from this question, we'll then go forward to another idea that you've brought out, which is that there has never been a serious census of how many people really work in the handloom and handicrafts industry. So some figures say there are around 7 million people, artisans in this industry. Some figures say there are over 200 million, which is then just amusing. So, ma'am, according to your work in this industry, how many do you really think there would be? And according to you, who then is an artisan and who can be counted as an artisan if ever there was a census?
Well, before you go counting, you have to realize how many people are practicing artisans, how many have the skill but do it part-time, how many people have been artisans before but have been thrown out because of no market and therefore shifted to something else like selling balloons or peddling a rickshaw. So when you ask for a census, very complicated. In Kashmir, for instance, most farmers in winter practice spinning and weaving. Now, do you write them down as a farmer? And if you meet a farmer, do you say, by the way, do you weave and spin in the winter? I don't think people know the local practices and cultures enough. So you have to have people who know what questions to ask. I know that many rickshawalas in Varanasi are weavers who have left it because there was no earning from it. But you don't go and ask the rickshawala, by the way, were you a weaver? You ask him and he'll say, I'm a rickshawala. So he will go perhaps into the service or transport sector or something. So you lose people through the cracks if you don't ask the right questions. Then you have, for instance, women who weave in their homes on little looms entirely through the Northeast. Now they are just part of a family. The man may be a farmer and a basket weaver. She weaves all her own clothes and clothes for her family and the community. Are these people counted separately? Is he the basket weaver? She is the handloom weaver? I don't know if we go so deep into it. So that's why I'm saying we have such a huge population, but this sector, partly because of wrong description of what it means right from British times, who looked upon this sector as a very decorative, ornamental thing, which was not part of their daily lives. And in fact, the British in colonial times completely worked to the detriment of the handloom and handicraft sector. They ruined it all because they wanted to create markets for their industrial revolution. So, the descriptions became more or less not recognizing what role the craftsperson had to play in our society. So it's a big struggle today to bring them back into self-worth, self-respect, self-confidence. And one of my efforts has been, for instance, like at Delhi Haat, bring them out from their villages, bring them directly to face the customer, let them get the full profit, let them look the customer in the eye and the customer see, look, this is the maker. You can ask him, how did you make it? What did you do? There is a greater respect and an awareness of each other. And the craftsperson also learns from the customer. The customer becomes almost like a designer. He'll say, okay, you have red and blue of something. Do you have yellow? It'd be nice if you had yellow. So that's an input for the craftsperson to learn. So it's a huge meeting place that is required, which never happened till maybe 20 years ago. Government started arranging craft bazaars and so on. And now, of course, it's lovely that there are hundreds of NGOs and designers and craft entrepreneurs and e-commerce people, all now so aware of crafts that it's like a whole new flourishing world and a new generation that's aware. So people like me who've worked for 45 years logging away to keep them alive, now are being taken into the hands of the younger generation to lift them further. So it's a very satisfying thing for somebody like me.
Right. Okay. So, ma'am, the next question for you right now would be that we all know that handicrafts and handloom specifically are known as a dying art form. And I'm not exactly sure how right that is, but that's what the mainstream media always reports it to be. So basically, I've read your work and everything, and I realized that you worked extensively on the revival of artisan communities in India, like pottery in Nilambur, Kerala, and basketry in Badohi in Uttar Pradesh. So I just wanted to know, how does this revival of dying art forms take place? Or do you even consider them to be a dying art form in the first place? And how do you go about creating the demand for handicrafts like this and increasing the efficiency of production?
Well, there was a lot of very important questions there, quite a big package you've thrown at me.
Right.
But I would say that in order to help anyone revive, you've got to first recognize. You've got to recognize that there is a skill there. And is there a problem? Is there both of these examples that you mentioned? One happened because in Nilambur, I read reports in the papers that a former potter's village, women had all turned to prostitution
All right.
because they used to make mud pots where in Kerala they would normally cook fish and rice. The markets had been taken over by steel and aluminium vessels, so their mud pots would not sell. And there were idle police posts few kilometers away where the police had been stationed there during the Mapla rebellion of hundreds of years ago, and
Right.
they'd not been removed from there, so they were idle. They used to drag these women in who would go to sell their pots in the nearby town and drag them in for prostitution. So the whole story came out in the media, which is, you mentioned the media, generally negative stories attract the media. There's a good point in it because then I noticed it. You notice the problem. The media highlights the problem. Unfortunately, they don't always highlight the solution. Or if the problem is over because somebody did something, they don't say, wow, look what something wonderful was done here. That becomes a positive story, which I think there's a wrong impression within the media that people don't like positive stories. I think today, the only story we don't want positive is a COVID test. Otherwise, we really want to hear positive stuff around us. So
Absolutely.
but if the media hadn't highlighted the migrants, there would have been a lot of less effort, perhaps, by NGOs and others to help them out and be more understanding. Hopefully, the construction industry will change their ways and so on. But anyway, back to Nilambur. So it meant finding out. I went there and I saw that the village had an alcohol shop right in the heart of the village. Men would do some roadside labor and come and spend their money on booze, and the women would not get money for food. And then, because their pots wouldn't sell, the women started earning from prostitution. So I had to do a project for 6 months to train them back into saleable clay earthen items. And I had other people working with me who were designers and imaginative people who created about 75 new products instead of just cooking pots or flower pots. So that brought them into publicity in the nearby town, in Cochin, and then I brought them to Delhi. So the story spread in a way that they could forget their negative social past. And today there's a whole section that does beautiful terracotta murals. I don't have anything to do with them anymore, but at least I lifted them from the time that it was miserable. And it was from a media story that I picked it up. In Badohi, it was a different story. The National Commission of Women was engaged with finding out how women in the carpet sector were faring because child labor, the problems about child labor had stopped boys from working, making carpets. So schools were set up for boys. So what happened? They needed nimble fingers. They needed people to work. So when the boys got taken out of the equation, the girls were put in there, women were put in there. So women from households started weaving carpets, and 5 women in a small dark room weaving a carpet and perhaps getting 700 rupees after 2 weeks of work. So it just wasn't enough with so many women-headed households. And it was such a pitiful condition. Dark room because it didn't have big windows. Why not big windows? Because thieves come in and steal whatever yarn they were given. Why no electricity? Because the upper caste cut the electric lines from these backward caste homes. This is a situation in a village. So when I went to see what was happening in carpets, I found this was what their situation was, weaving carpets. Then at the end of the day, after a big meeting to hear their grievances, I had to write my report, and then they came to me with their little baskets which they had made in their homes, which is a tradition for them to make these baskets for their own use.
Right.
When they go for a wedding, they put a sari in one, mithai in one, jewelry in one, bangles in one, and carry it in a procession to the bridegroom's house when they go with the bride. So this, they said that nobody has come to ask us before how we women felt in this sector. So just as a thank you gift, they gave me these beautifully woven baskets. So I immediately thought, never mind carpets, let's do baskets. And I got them in various steps, which I won't go into, it will be too long. But I helped them to be recognized in the marketplace through craft bazaars I organized. Then other people liked their work, they called them to craft bazaars. Other shopkeepers bought their baskets to sell further. So they became known, and we produced little catalogs which we sent to corporate houses saying, please send your Diwali mithai in this. So we gave it a push up after making women realize that you can bring value to your life by bringing value to your skill and your basket. So that was my slogan in my head at that time.